They say a birthday is supposed to be a celebration, laughter, love, and the people who matter most. That night, our table was full of all three, or at least that's what I thought. The restaurant buzzed with warmth, golden lights, clinking glasses, a cake big enough to hide behind. My husband smiled across the table, charming as ever, telling stories that made everyone laugh. I watch him the way you do when you've loved someone for so long you forget to question what's real. But then his phone buzzed. Once, twice. The same name lighting up again and again. Baby. He didn't see it, but I did. And the moment I picked up his phone, the world around me fell silent. The laughter, the music, the candles, all gone. Just me, a screen, and a truth so sharp it cut through every lie he'd ever told. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood up and walked out without a word. I wasn't going to throw him a party that year. I told myself that several times. Between his late nights at work and my growing resentment of his absences, the idea of celebrating him fell hollow. But then he looked at me one morning, eyes tired, shirt half-buttoned, and said, "Don't make a big deal out of my birthday this year, okay?" That's when I knew I'd do it anyway. Because that's what love does when it's trying to prove it still exists. I booked a private table at his favorite Italian restaurant, invited his closest friends, a few colleagues, even his sister. I spent hours picking out the cake, triple-layer chocolate with the kind of frosting he pretended to hate but always finished first. I told myself the tension between us was just life, the stress of two careers, long hours, and missed dinners. I told myself that when he smiled at his phone late at night, it was a meme, a message from his boss, anything but what it probably was. Denial has a soft voice, and I've been listening to it for months. The day of the party, I woke up before him. The sky outside was gray, a thin drizzle painting the windows. He looked peaceful in sleep, younger almost. I brushed a stray hair from his forehead, wondering when he'd stopped feeling like home and started feeling like a stranger. He stirred. "You're up early," he mumbled, voice rough with sleep. "I wanted to make you breakfast." He smiled faintly. "You don't have to do that." "I know." I forced a smile back. "But I want to." He reached for my hand, that old familiar gesture, but something in it felt rehearsed, like muscle memory without meaning. As I cracked the eggs and poured the coffee, he sat at the counter, scrolling through his phone. I try not to notice the way his expression shifted, the faint smirk, the half-hidden grin he thought I didn't see. When I asked what was funny, he said, "Just a client email, right?" Because clients send emojis with hearts now. By noon, I was deep in the chaos of party prep. Balloons, seating arrangements, wine selections. I'd done this for years. Birthdays, anniversaries, promotions, creating the illusion of a perfect marriage for an audience that never asked to see the cracks. His sister called around 3. "You're still doing the dinner, right?" "He has no idea." "No idea," I said, forcing cheer in my tone. "Good," she laughed. "He loves surprises." The irony wasn't lost on me. So did I, apparently. By 6, I changed twice, settled on a black dress he once said made me look like trouble in heels. I stared at my reflection in the mirror and wondered if trouble was all I'd ever been to him. Something to tame, something to hide. He came home just as I was finishing my makeup. "You look nice," he said, leaning in to kiss me. His lips were warm, practiced. "You ready for dinner?" I asked. He blinked. "Dinner. Reservation. 8 o'clock. Just us." He smiled. "Perfect." He didn't know half the city was waiting to shout surprise. The restaurant glowed like a scene from a movie. Candles, laughter, the smell of wine and rosemary. Our friends filled the room, all warmth and noise. When he walked in, the collective surprise nearly startled him into dropping his coat. He laughed, that charming, deep laugh that always made people lean in. He hugged everyone, thanked me, kissed my forehead. "You didn't have to do this," he whispered. "I wanted to," I said. "You deserve it." At the time, I almost believed it. The night unfolded beautifully. Glasses clinked, stories flowed, and for a few hours, I could almost pretend things were normal. He held my hand beneath the table, squeezed it when someone made a joke at his expense. We looked like the perfect couple because we'd learned how to play that part flawlessly. Then, near the end of dinner, his phone buzzed. It wasn't unusual. He was always on call. always important. But the way his eyes flickered to the screen and back again, too fast, too deliberate, caught my attention. He silenced it quickly, sliding the phone face down beside his plate. I tried to ignore it. I did, but when it buzzed again, three sharp vibrations, something in me shifted. I glanced down. The name glowing across the screen wasn't Mom or work. It was Baby Redheart. My stomach turned to stone. He didn't notice. He was laughing at something his friend said, swirling the last sip of his wine. My hands felt detached from my body as I reached for the phone. I told myself not to look, but my curiosity had already mutated into something darker. The need for truth, no matter how ugly. I pressed the screen. The message opened mid-conversation. Baby Redheart, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last night was incredible. I keep thinking about it. Baby Redheart, does she suspect anything? Baby Redheart, you look so good today. I miss you already. My chest tightened. There was a photo too. Blurry. Taken from his office, maybe? The edge of his desk, a woman's hand holding a glass of wine. A hand that wasn't mine. The world around me blurred. Laughter melting into white noise, the flicker of candlelight turning harsh. I set the phone down carefully, afraid the trembling in my fingers would give me away. My pulse thundered in my ears. He looked up then, smiling, completely unaware that his life had just cracked open in front of him. Everything okay? He asked lightly, reaching for his glass. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd spent 10 years beside. The man I'd defended, forgiven, trusted. His smile, his charm, his calm. All of it now looked like camouflage. Everything's fine, I said quietly. He nodded, pleased, turning back to his friends. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped softly against the floor, not loud enough for anyone but him to notice. He looked up again, confused. Where are you going? Home. Now? The cake. I don't want cake. He frowned, his smile faltering. What's wrong? Nothing, I said. That's the problem. And before anyone could stop me, I walked toward the door, calm, deliberate, each step heavier than the last. I didn't slam anything. I didn't look back, because the moment I saw that name on his screen, I knew he'd already taken everything loud from me. My anger, my trust, my voice. So I left him in silence, because sometimes silence is the only thing loud enough to hurt. The first sound I heard when I reached the parking lot was my own heartbeat. No yelling, no slamming doors, no chasing like in the movies. Just the quiet click of my heels against wet pavement and the echo of everything I'd just seen. People always talk about heartbreak like it's loud, but that night it was silent. A clean cut instead of a scream. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes before I could move. The phone buzzed in my purse once, twice, then stopped. I didn't even have to look to know it was him. Through the restaurant's glass windows, I saw him searching the crowd, confusion painted across his face. His smile had slipped. His performance was unraveling. Someone probably asked if everything was okay. He'd lie, of course. He was good at that. When I finally started the car, I didn't drive home. I just drove, no destination, no plan. City lights blurred into lines. My reflection in the rear view looked unfamiliar. A woman too calm to be angry, too tired to cry. I ended up at the pier, our pier. The place he'd proposed to me 7 years ago under cheap fairy lights and the smell of salt water. The same place he once told me I was the safest thing that ever happened to him. Funny, isn't it? Safety. I'd built my whole life around making him feel safe, stable, adored, forgiven. And somewhere along the line, I stopped noticing that I didn't feel safe myself. Rain began to fall again, soft at first, then heavier. I stepped out of the car anyway, letting it soak through my dress. The cold grounded me. I remembered his laugh at dinner, the way everyone looked at us like we were perfect. I remembered how many times I defended him when friends warned me he was distant, secretive. He's just busy, I'd say. He loves me. He just shows it differently. But what I saw on that screen wasn't different. It was betrayal, deliberate and meticulous. By midnight, I finally went home. The house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. Every object inside screamed of him. The jacket on the chair, the half-empty cologne bottle, the framed photos that suddenly felt like evidence. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared at the clock. Each second ticked like a hammer. I wanted to confront him, to demand explanations. But what would he say? It's not what it looks like. She means nothing? You're overreacting? Men like him always have lines rehearsed for the moments they're caught. So instead of calling him, I sat down at the table and opened his laptop. He never bothered with passwords. That was part of the illusion of trust. Within minutes, I found what I was looking for, an email thread, weeks long, between him and her. From Evan D. to Leah M. Subject, next time. Can't stop thinking about you. I'll find a way to tell her soon. She deserves better than lies. We both do. My stomach twisted. He'd written that on our anniversary week. Another message, a day later. Dinner at Caro's tonight. She's planning something for my birthday. You'd laugh if you knew how hard she's trying. I'll make it up to you after. She's planning something. That was me. He'd been writing about me in real time to another woman while I was baking his favorite cake and picking his favorite wine. The cruelty was surgical. I kept scrolling. Pictures, receipts for a hotel room, messages about trips that never happened, excuses that suddenly made perfect sense. I wanted to scream, but the noise caught in my throat. When the front door opened, I froze. Anna. His voice was cautious, careful. He found me at the kitchen table, laptop still open. For a split second, guilt flickered in his eyes. And then it was gone, replaced by concern. He always pivoted to control. Hey, he said softly. You scared me when you left. I didn't know what happened. I didn't answer. He followed my gaze to the screen. The color drained from his face. Where did you get that? You left your email open, I said flatly. He exhaled through his nose. Anna, please, it's not what you think. I laughed. Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think. Leah, it was complicated. Complicated? My voice rose. You told her you'd find a way to tell me. You let me plan that entire dinner while you were promising her the truth. He took a step closer, lowering his tone. I didn't want to hurt you. You already did. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I ended it weeks ago. She's just not letting go. So, she sent you love messages tonight, out of nostalgia? He hesitated too long. I shook my head. You're a terrible liar when you're cornered. He slammed the laptop shut. Fine. You want honesty? I messed up. I'm human. But don't act like you're perfect, Anna. You've been distant for months. I stared at him, incredulous. You cheated, and your defense is that I wasn't affectionate enough. He didn't meet my eyes. Things haven't been good between us. You stopped looking at me like you used to. Leah, she listened. She reminded me who I was. That's funny, I said coldly. Because you reminded me tonight who you really are. We stood there in silence, a silence so sharp it hummed. Then, quietly, he said, You'll forgive me. You always do. Something inside me broke at those words. He meant them. He believed in my forgiveness like it was furniture, something that would always be there, waiting. I stood up. Not this time. He blinked. What? I grabbed my bag, my keys. My movements were calm, deliberate. You don't get to rewrite this, Evan. You don't get to make me small. He followed me to the door. Where are you going? Away from the mess you made. You're overreacting, he called after me. It's one mistake. I turned, meeting his eyes. You don't call it a mistake when it's a pattern. Then I left, again. This time it felt final. I drove to a friend's place and spent the night on her couch, staring at the ceiling, too numb for tears. In the morning, she handed me coffee and said quietly, You don't owe him understanding. The words landed like truth. By afternoon, I packed a suitcase and checked into a small hotel near the coast. No phone calls, no explanations, just quiet. That evening, I wrote him a note, not for him but for me. You made me question everything I thought I knew about love. But the one thing you reminded me of is this. I can survive honesty, even the brutal kind. What I can't survive is a lie wrapped in affection. I left it on the kitchen counter when I returned for my things. When I walked out again, I didn't look back. The days that followed felt like standing inside an echo. Silence was everywhere. In the hotel room, the walk to the coffee shop, even in the way strangers' voices seemed too distant to reach me. I'd gone through all the textbook stages, shock, anger, disbelief, but none of them fit. What I felt was deeper. A hollowing out, like someone had scooped out the part of me that used to believe in us. Evan called, a dozen times the first day, then texted, "We need to talk. Please come home. You're blowing this out of proportion." Each message was a new version of the same old script. I didn't answer, not because I didn't have words, I had too many, but because I wanted him to sit in the same silence he'd built for me over years of half-truths. Then, on the third day, a different message appeared. Unknown number. "You don't know me, but we need to talk. It's about Evan." My stomach dropped. The area code was local. I hesitated for a full minute before replying. "Who is this?" "Leah." The response came quickly. "I think you deserve to know everything." For a long time, I just stared at the name Leah, the woman whose texts had detonated my marriage, the name that had turned my world inside out. She wanted to talk. Part of me wanted to ignore her, block, delete, erase. But another part, the one that couldn't stop replaying his words, "It's not what you think," needed the truth. I typed slowly. "Where?" "Your choice." The pier, I wrote. "Tomorrow. Noon." When I arrived, she was already there, tall, slender, wrapped in a beige coat. She looked nothing like I expected. Not glamorous or reckless. Just normal. The kind of woman you'd pass in a grocery store and forget 5 minutes later. She turned when she saw me. "Anna." I nodded. Her voice trembled slightly. "Thank you for meeting me. I didn't know if you would." "I almost didn't." She looked out at the water. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. When I met him, he told me you were separated." I laughed under my breath. That's his favorite trick. He says it like a password. Her eyes filled with guilt. I believed him. He said you'd grown apart, that you were living different lives. I even asked why he hadn't filed yet. He said it was complicated, that you were fragile. Fragile. That word burned through me like acid. "I found out the truth the night of his birthday," she continued softly. "He told me he was busy with a work dinner, but I saw photos online. You and him celebrating." "Why tell me now?" I asked. She hesitated. "Because there's more you don't know." I folded my arms. "Such as?" She pulled a small envelope from her purse. "I found this at his office last week. He'd left in a hurry and forgot his bag. Inside was a printed receipt, a wire transfer for $20,000, dated 2 weeks earlier. The account name wasn't hers. It was someone else's. I thought maybe he was helping someone," she said, "but then I did some digging. The account belongs to a woman named Elaine Carter." The name meant nothing to me, until she added, "She works in HR at his company." My chest tightened. Why would he send her money? Leah looked at me carefully. "Because she's the one who knows he's been siphoning funds from client accounts. I think he paid her to keep quiet." I stared at her, speechless. She opened her phone and scrolled through messages, screenshots, bank statements, even photos of documents with Evan's signature. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked finally. "Because he'll ruin you too," she said. "Everything's in your joint name. He's been using your signature on some of the authorizations." The world tilted. It wasn't just infidelity, it was fraud. And he dragged me into it without a word. Leah watched my face carefully. "I know you hate me, but I'm not your enemy. He's lied to both of us." "I don't hate you," I said slowly. "You're just another person who believed him." She looked relieved, but her hands still shook. "He's panicking. When you left, he started calling me nonstop. He said if the company audits his division, it'll all come out." I swallowed hard. "You think he'll run?" She nodded. "He already moved some money offshore." The wind picked up then, cold and biting. I looked out at the water, trying to process the pieces. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was using me as a shield. When I got back to the hotel, I spent hours going through our shared files, bank accounts, investment folders, tax forms. And there it was. Transfers I'd never authorized. Signatures I didn't recognize, but somehow they matched mine perfectly. He'd forged them. The nausea came in waves. For years, I'd been the dutiful wife, the one who trusted, supported, believed, while he quietly built a maze of lies in my name. That night, I called an attorney. Not one we'd ever used, someone new, discreet. Her name was Rachel Chu, and her voice was steady. "I've seen this before," she said after I explained everything. "He's covering embezzlement with spousal signatures. You need to separate your finances immediately." "How?" I asked. Do you still have access to your joint accounts? Yes. Then move half. Legally, you're entitled to it. After that, close the shared credit lines and file a preliminary fraud notice under your name. Quietly. Don't confront him until you're protected. Her tone was calm, professional, but my hands shook as I followed every instruction. By the next morning, I'd done it. Half the funds were transferred to a new account. The credit cards frozen. The joint account flagged. It felt like cutting a cord that had been strangling me for years. Evan called again that afternoon, this time from an unknown number. I let it ring, then played the voicemail later. Anna, listen, I need to explain. Things are complicated right now. I made mistakes, yes, but you don't understand the pressure I've been under. We can fix this. Just call me back before you do anything stupid. Stupid. That word was enough to remind me exactly who he was. I didn't reply, but I did forward the recordings, the screenshots, and the receipts Leah had given me, all of it, to my attorney. By nightfall, Rachel had already contacted the company's legal department. A quiet internal review began the next morning. 3 days later, Leah called again, her voice shaking. They know, she whispered. HR called him in this morning. He looked terrified. I think it's over. Good, I said, but part of me still felt unfinished. I'd built a life around a man who lied to my face every day. Walking away didn't erase that. I needed closure, so I called him once. He answered immediately. Anna, thank God. I know everything, I said flatly. The money, the forged signatures. Leah told me. Silence. Then, you talked to her? His voice sharpened. You shouldn't have done that. You don't know what you started. You started it, Evan. He sighed. You think this is about money? You think I'd risk everything for cash? You have no idea how deep this goes. What does that mean? But he'd already hung up. That night, I barely slept. His words replayed in my mind. You have no idea how deep this goes. Was it just a threat? Or was there something else still hidden? By morning, I had my answer. A knock on my hotel door. When I opened it, 2 men in suits stood there. Mrs. Daniels? One asked, showing a badge. We're investigators with the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband's company. And just like that, the secret that started at a birthday dinner was no longer a private heartbreak. It was a public scandal. The 2 investigators stepped into the room, their shoes squeaking faintly on the linoleum floor. One of them, tall, composed, polite, gestured toward the small table by the window. May we sit? I nodded, my hands tightening around the edge of the chair. We're not here to accuse you of anything, he began gently. But your husband, Evan Daniels, is under investigation for embezzlement and document fraud. We understand that several authorizations may have been filed under your name. We need to confirm whether you were aware of these transactions. The words didn't shock me anymore. I'd already lived the moment of betrayal. This was just the paperwork that came after. I slid a folder across the table, copies of everything Leah and I had found, along with statement from my attorney. I wasn't aware, I said quietly, but I'm aware now, and I want to cooperate fully. The investigator nodded, impressed. You've done the right thing. Most spouses try to protect the other. I've done enough protecting, I said. The days that followed felt like watching a storm roll over from a distance, destructive, inevitable, and strangely peaceful once it hit. Evan was arrested a week later. The story broke across local news within hours. Corporate accountant charged with embezzlement and forgery. They printed his photo, the confident grin, the suit, the tie I'd picked for him last Christmas. Reporters camped outside our old house. His colleagues gave anonymous statements about unusual financial discrepancies and behavioral red flags. And Leah? She disappeared from the headlines as quietly as she had appeared in my life. She sent one last text before changing her number. He told me he'd fix everything. I guess I finally learned what that meant. I hope you find peace, Anna. Peace. The word sounded foreign then, but it was coming slowly, like morning light through fog. The company froze his accounts. The house went up for investigation. But thanks to Rachel, I was protected. She moved quickly, ensuring the fraudulent authorizations were legally disowned under my name. You're in the clear, she told me one afternoon, her voice firm. It'll take a few months for everything to settle, but you'll come out of this with your record and your dignity intact. I nodded, though my mind was elsewhere. Do you want to press any personal charges? She asked. I thought about it. About revenge, about headlines, about closure. But what I really wanted wasn't punishment. It was distance. No, I said finally. Let the truth do what it always does. She smiled. Then you've already won. When I visited the old house one last time, the air inside was stale, a museum of a life that never really existed. The wedding photos were still on the wall. The couch where we'd watched movies, laughed, and fought. The faint smell of his cologne lingering like an afterthought. I packed what was mine, the essentials, a few keepsakes, the framed photo of my parents, and left the rest behind. Outside, I met the mail carrier, an older man who'd known us for years. He handed me a small envelope. This came today. Looks personal. The handwriting was unmistakable. Evans. I didn't open it right away. I drove to the pier, again, our pier, and sat where we once carved our initials into the wood. Only now, the sea didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a witness. I tore open the letter. Anna, I know there's nothing I can say that will make sense to you. But please believe this. Not everything was a lie. I did love you. I still do. What happened with the company started small. A shortcut, a mistake I thought I could fix. Then it spiraled. Leah found out and I panicked. I never meant to drag you into it, but I was desperate. When you walked out that night, it was like watching my entire life leave with you. Maybe I deserve what's coming. Maybe it's the only way to stop lying, even to myself. If you ever think of me again, I hope it's not as the man who betrayed you, but as the fool who didn't realize how much he lost. Evan, I read it twice, then once more. Not because I needed forgiveness, but because it was the first time in years that he'd spoken without manipulation, without charm, without control. It wasn't an apology I could accept, but it was one I could understand. Months passed. The case dragged through the system, but my part in it ended early. The prosecutors had enough evidence to convict him without me. One morning, Rachel called with final confirmation. It's done, she said. He's pled guilty. You're officially clear of everything. I thanked her quietly and hung up. For a long moment, I stood at my small apartment window, watching the city wake up. People rushing, buses humming, sunlight catching on glass. Life, ordinary, honest life, moving on. It struck me how much smaller my world had become and how much freer it felt. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I met friends I drifted from. I learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. And one evening, sitting by that same window, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Just grateful for the clarity, for the chance to rebuild. 6 months later, I ran into Leah at a bookstore. She looked different, calmer, softer. We both froze for a second before she smiled carefully. I heard he got 3 years, she said quietly. I nodded. He did. I'm sorry again, she added. For all of it. You don't have to be, I said. We both just believed the wrong person. She exhaled, visibly relieved. You seem better. I am, I admitted. I thought I'd never get here, but I am. We chatted briefly about work, books, life, two strangers bound by the same storm, both learning to walk again. When she left, I felt no bitterness, only closure. That night, I drove back to the restaurant from his birthday, the same one where everything fell apart. It was quiet, nearly empty. I sat at a corner table, ordered a single glass of wine, and let the memories pass like a slideshow I no longer needed to pause. I realized something profound then. I hadn't walked out to punish him that night. I'd walked out to save myself. He'd built a world of illusions, but the moment I left that table, I stopped living in one. The truth didn't collapse my life. It freed it. As I left the restaurant, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Different woman, same eyes. Behind me, laughter floated from another table. Maybe another couple celebrating something fragile and beautiful. I smiled, not bitterly but softly, because life, for all its chaos, has a way of giving you exactly what you need after taking everything you thought you wanted. I walked to my car, the night air crisp, my heart strangely light. No tears, no regrets, just peace, the kind that comes when silence finally sounds like strength.